Hi everyone and welcome back. In this lecture we are going to explore how economists estimate the value of ecosystem services using something called stated preference approaches. By the end of this lecture you'll know what these approaches are, why they matter for conservation and how they can help us put a value on nature. So what are stated preference approaches? They are survey-based tools designed to measure how people value ecosystem services that aren't bought or sold in markets. Things like scenic landscapes, the existence of rare species, or the bequest value of passing nature on to future generations. We usually begin these surveys with general questions about the respondent, how they relate to the environment, what they value, and how they feel about conservation. These questions explore environmental concern, perceptions of responsibility or emotional ties to specific ecosystems. Then we move to the core, the hypothetical questions that ask how much people would be willing to pay to conserve nature or to avoid environmental damage. These responses allow us to estimate the monetary value people assign to services such as clean water or the preservation of untouched landscapes. Why use these approaches? There are three main reasons in my point of view. Capturing non-market values. Many services like cultural values, spiritual connections, or biodiversity protection aren't traded in markets, and stated preference approaches give us a way to measure them. Second one, inclusivity, by asking people directly what they care about and what they support, we bring public values into conservation decisions, whether for funding, planning, or prioritization actions. And the last one is policy relevance. They provide structured, evidence-based input for policy design, cost-benefit analysis, or negotiations. In other words, they help translate care for nature into actionable insights. So, stated preference surveys usually rely on two main methods, contingent evaluation, a direct approach where we ask people how much they would be willing to pay or accept as compensation for a specific environmental change. For example, would you be willing to pay $20 per year to conserve this landscape? Then we have like the choice experiments. Here people are presented with different scenarios, each with attributes like biodiversity level, public access and cost, and asked to choose their preferred option or preferred scenario. This helps us see not only what people value, but also the trade-offs they are willing to make. Both methods rely on hypothetical questions, but they serve different purposes. Contingent evaluation is best when the goal is to obtain a single value estimate, while contingent choice experiments is more useful for understanding relative preference among several attributes, although choice experiments also allow you to calculate the willingness to pay or willingness to accept. So to apply contingent evaluation, you need a clearly defined environmental change, for example, restoring a wetland, protecting an endangered species, a survey scenario written in plain accessible language, a payment vehicle like a tax, donation, or entry fee, a willingness to pay or willingness to accept question. Once responses are collected, the data is analyzed statistically. We often calculate the average or median willingness to pay and explore how responses vary by factors such as income, education, or attitudes. With population data, we can then scale up to estimate the total value at the community or at the regional level. In choice experiments, the first step is identifying key attributes of a conservation project, such as biodiversity levels, water quality, access, or enforcement. Each attribute has different levels, for instance, low, medium, high biodiversity. These attributes are combined into sets of scenarios and respondents are asked to choose between them. The analysis typically uses models like the multinomial logit. From these, we can calculate marginal willingness to pay, for example, how much people are willing to pay for an improvement in biodiversity relative to cost. Choice experiments thus provides deeper insight into trade-offs among attributes. Let's look at a practical example of contingent valuation. In one study that I participated, our goal was to estimate Bolivians' willingness to pay for a one-year protected air passport that would grant access to all national parks in Bolivia. Similar programs exist in countries like the US and Canada, but in Bolivia this was like a new idea. So we designed a content evaluation survey and conducted over 1,000 phone interviews across the country. Respondents were told that even if they didn't plan to visit national parks, purchasing the passport would still support conservation efforts like ranger salaries, trail maintenance, biodiversity monitoring, and community outreach. So using econometric models such as Logit and Probit, we estimated the average willingness to pay. The results showed an average of about $35 for the annual passport. For comparison, a similar pass in the US cost around $80 per year. Now let's consider an example of a choice experiment. Imagine a survey where people choose between conservation scenarios with different features, such as forest cover, level of biodiversity, recreation access, and cost. By analyzing choices across many respondents, we can estimate willingness to pay for each attribute. So, for example, we could try to answer how much more are people willing to pay to conserve 70% of the forest instead of 30 or 25%. What is the value of protecting endangered species compared to no protection? And how much do people value full access compared to limited access? Choice models then revealed not just whether people support conservation, but which specific features they value most and what trade-offs they are willing to make. To conclude, stated preference approaches like content evaluation and choice experiments give us tools to measure values that marketers overlook. They bring people's voice into conservation decisions and help us understand not just whether people care about nature, but how much and what trade-offs they are willing to make. Ultimately, the goal is not just to put a number on nature, but to make conservation decisions more informed, inclusive, and effective. Of course, all methods have their limitations. In this case, we have, for example, hypothetical bias, and survey design complexity. A well-designed survey takes time and money. However, despite these limitations, these approaches are the only ones that allow you to calculate the monetary value of non-use values such as existence value. With that, I conclude this brief lecture. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one. Bye.